Thank you for the information. I think this is really important because it clarifies that this is a safe system, and it clarifies also some of the questions that have been put on the surveys. So once the refugees comes here, when the war is over, do they become Canadian citizens?
Okay. So if you remember in the video, Justin Trudeau says, you entered the plane as refugees, you are now permanent residents. And what permanent residence is sort of the stepping stone in immigration to Canada. So you never automatically become a citizen. You become a permanent resident. And so refugees who come to Canada and claim asylum, once they're determined to be a refugee, can apply for permanent residence. Refugees who are resettled are granted permanent residence when they arrive in Canada. And basically, permanent residence means that these people have to pay taxes, follow Canadian laws, and in exchange they have the right to get the same social benefits as Canadian citizens, healthcare coverage, for example. They can live, work, study anywhere in Canada. They have that freedom of mobility. They have protection under Canadian laws, the Charter, and they can apply for citizenship after a certain time period, which is essentially having lived in Canada for 2 out of 5 years. Now, there are certain things that permanent residents don't have that citizens have, which is an unqualified right to stay in Canada. So for one example, if you commit certain crimes as a permanent resident, Canada can say, well, you violated our trust, essentially, you're no longer welcome here and you will lose your permanent resident status. If you are a Canadian citizen and commit those same crimes, Canada might not like you very much, but all they will do is put you in jail. They can't kick you out of our country. In terms of refugees, the idea of refugee status, that obligation in the 1951 Convention is non-refoulement, not to send someone back, but it isn't a guarantee of permanent status. And so there is something in refugee law called cessation of status. And when you are still a permanent resident, the Canadian government can say that your refugee status has ceased. And why they might say that is because you returned to your home country to go for a visit, or you got a passport from that country, and they might apply for cessation of your status, which would mean you would lose your right to stay in Canada. It doesn't happen that often. And as soon as you move from being a permanent resident to a Canadian citizen, no matter what you do, you're not going to lose that status in Canada as a citizen. Then they lose the ability to say you're no longer welcome here.
If I may add just a little bit. So when you become, Shona just explained, you become a permanent resident. Number one, you land in the airport, automatically you become a permanent resident. You come to the country as a refugee claimant, you claim refugee, and you put through the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada to determine whether you are actually a refugee, and they determine that you're a refugee, you apply for permanent resident, and you become a permanent resident. You wait for a couple of years, mostly, recently it's been 4 years, now I understand it's changed, it's going to be likely to change to 3 years of residency stay in Canada, and then you can apply to become a permanent Canadian citizen. You apply, you wait for the application to be processed, and once all the checks have been done, you do something called Canadian citizenship test. You do the test. If you pass the test, then you take the oath to become a Canadian citizen. If you don't pass the test, then you have 2 more chances to be able to do the test. If you don't pass those 2 times, then you have to wait again and apply afresh. The trick, that certain law that was enacted in the last government was that you have to have a certain benchmark of English to be able to be eligible to take the citizenship test. Initially, it used to be that, once you have lived 3 years, you can apply for a citizenship test, and if you fail the test, you go through in front of a citizenship judge who can ask the questions orally, and if the judge determines that you are functionable in the market and you can answer those questions, they grant you citizenship. Now, you don't have that option. Most refugees and immigrants, when they come here and they do this, they have to attain that level of benchmark level 4, Canadian language benchmark level 4, to be able to become eligible to apply for Canadian citizenship even in the first place.